all this Greek and Latin stuff. What you really want to be doing is preparing the youth of this country to take up arms to get into the national struggle. And the stanza goes like this: "You teach Greek verbs and Latin nouns," the dreamer of young Ireland said. "You do not hear the muffled call, the sword being forged, the far-off tread of hosts to meet as Gael and Gaul. What good to us your wisdom store, your Latin verse, your Grecian lore?" But the poem ends with the poor scholar's faith in his calling being stated. And as he sees it, his job is the maintenance and the transmission of cultural memory, as opposed to any form of ideological indoctrination or propaganda. He declares his belief and virtue in the passing on of the classical tradition, even in the deprived conditions of the countryside in 19th century Ireland. He will be well enough rewarded, the old poor scholar says, if his students' idiom, their speech, and their range of reference are improved by the style and the content of the stories and work that he teaches them. And the last stanza of the poem goes like this, where the poor scholar makes his statement of mission statement, if you like. "And what to me is Gael and Gaul, less than the Latin and the Greek. I teach these by the dim rush light in smoky cabins week by week. But what avails my teaching slight? Years hence, in rustic speech, a phrase, as in wild earth, a Grecian vase." As in wild earth, a Grecian vase. The line is well known still, often quoted, and the image is very potent and very suggestive. Something precious dug up unexpectedly out of this wild earth. But in fact, I think the image is far, far stronger than the argument that it is meant to illustrate. The poor scholar says he'll be satisfied enough if fragments of his teaching are remembered and quotations from the classical authors turn up to adorn the speech of the country people in years ahead. So I think we might actually be able to accuse him, unfairly maybe, unkindly, of reduced ambition, and to say that the purpose of his lessons isn't just to fit the students out with a dictionary of classical quotations, if you like, or the Bluffer's Guide to the Ancient World, you know. Not that. When he was asked by the dreamer of young Ireland, "What good to us your wisdom store, your Latin verse, your Grecian lore?" he might have answered in the words of Robert Frost. Robert Frost's words about how Frost defined education. The purpose of education, Frost said, was to change the plane of regard. So you would take a different angle on things. And the same could have been said by the poor scholar. I teach the classics to change the plane of regard, to give us another pattern. The purpose of his Greek and Latin lore, he might have said, isn't just to strengthen rhetorical performance. Its purpose is to provide those trustworthy coordinates to produce a community of individuals with inner freedom, with a strong sense of what's what in their heads, a community of individuals rather than a herd of conformists bound together by Latin ties. He might even have said that his students would understand more about Gael and Gaul if they happened to read about those other Gauls that Master Caesar dealt with in his own way. He might learn something about imperial power and native culture in that way. However, his classical wisdom store, he might have argued, would allow the pupils to take a firmer grip on their experience, allow them to see it in another pattern, and be able to take a truer measure of themselves and their world. That, at any rate, was what this poor scholar learned in that hill school on Bishop Street, and is what he's glad to substantiate here half a century later in this historic anniversary year of the college's history. Thank you.
and gentlemen, you're not going to expect me to summarise that. I think we could have taken every paragraph and examined and delved into that in seminars endlessly. It's been a true example of what you would study if you went to Oxford, and is called Literae Humaniores. The word for classics there. Humane letters, literature to do with human beings, which of course when that term was invented was set in contrast with, of course, sacred letters, two sides of the same coin. However, there's one lesson here, I think, for students. If you want to be poets, then you've got to see the other patterns. And you can do this very simply by imitating one of the H's that Professor Heaney talked about, Homer. Homer is famous for his similes. When you read Homer's Iliad, you'll find 7% of the Iliad consists of similes. And I'm going to read you one, and you'll see the point of what I'm doing. Because if you begin to think in terms of similes, then you're beginning to think like a poet. And it's a very sort of easy thing to do, except, of course, it's fantastically difficult to do. Let me give you one example of a Homeric simile, one of my favourites. We're in book 15 of the Iliad, and here's the god Apollo knocking down the defensive wall that the Greeks had built round their camp on the shores of Troy. And he's knocked it down and he's leading the Trojans across. This is what Homer says. In front of them, in front of the Trojans, Phoebus Apollo easily kicked in the banks of the deep ditch and piled them into the middle, making a broad and ample causeway, wide as the distance a man throws a spear when he's testing his strength. Here the Trojans poured across rank after rank, led by Apollo. Then, with equal ease, the god knocked down the Greek wall. Here we go. As a boy at the seaside knocks down a sandcastle. He builds it to amuse himself, as boys do, and then with his hands and feet wrecks the whole thing for fun. So you, Apollo, wrecked the Greeks' efforts and sowed panic among them. The god Apollo, a military defensive wall, the battlefield, and all of a sudden, a boy at play with a sandcastle on a beach. You see what I mean? What Professor Heaney was talking about, other patterns. You put the two together, whoop, and the sparks fly. And these patterns are of enormous importance, I think, for another reason too. It's vital to see the ideas in other patterns. Because if we can't, we've no means to resist the patterns that are imposed upon us by our teachers, our media, our politicians. Alternative ways of thinking about the world are crucial to us if we are to be independent of whatever the winds of passing fads and fashion happen to blow our way. All public institutions, even St. Columns, invite us, for the very best of motives, to be dependent on them. It's a lure that you must be prepared to resist, until, of course, you've tested it to the limit. That means being able to see the other pattern. And here, of course, as Professor Heaney has been telling us, one invaluable source of that other pattern, or those other patterns, is the ancient world. I spent a lot of my time thinking about the ancient world and modern world for my little column in The Spectator. And I read something this week, made my ears drop off. The Pentagon, apparently, has invented an aphrodisiac bomb. Did you read about this? Quite extraordinary. The theory being that you drop it over the enemy soldiers, and they immediately find each other sexually irresistible. Now, if you said that to an ancient Greek, he would have said, well, what on earth use would that be? Because, of course, there were many ancient Greek states that put homosexual lovers in the front line of battle because you do not wish to let down your lover. So Greek would say, well, this is a crazy thing to do. Please, don't think that I'm proposing the British troops should be trained like this. But you see, here's a wonderful example of a completely different way of thinking about the world. Another pattern. A more serious one might be one that occurred to me a very long time ago and becomes no less relevant as the years go by. Professor Heaney was talking about the Antigone and the Philoctetes in these terms. The one I'd offer would be Aeschylus's Oresteia. that great tragedy about the vendetta which rips through the house of Atreus. Agamemnon kills his daughter, Clytemnestra, his wife, kills Agamemnon. Their son then comes to kill Clytemnestra. This vendetta going on and on and on, until Orestes is brought to Athens, pursued by the Furies, who want to take revenge on him. And there he is tried by a democratic court and found innocent. Now, if the trilogy had ended there, one could argue that Aeschylus was really depicting the development of a system of democratic punishment, whose job was to prevent victims taking the law into their own hands. That's the only way to break a vendetta. You take it out of the hands of the victims and put it in the hands of a democratic court. But that's not where the play ends. The Furies, when this judgment goes against them, are absolutely outraged, and they threaten to pour curses upon Athens. And the goddess Heaney, who has overseen this court, takes them aside and says, no, come into Athens, come inside the democratic body politic and oversee this new, more flexible justice. And she wins the argument, and the reconciled Furies, now called the Eumenides, the kindly ones, are welcomed into the new city, promising not curses, but blessings. Men of violence will be defeated only when, like the Furies, they are levered out of their own enclosed, dark world of inflexible, automatic revenge dispensed through terror, and brought within a system of publicly accountable, democratic justice under the full glare of the law. They won't like it. I suspect we won't like it even more. But I can see no possible alternative. Professor Heaney has reminded us of something of enormous importance. We rightly put tremendous energy into preserving for future generations a healthy physical environment. We're all ecologists now, and quite right too. But there is a cultural environment too. What humans have thought and done over thousands of years of human experience. And there it all is on a plate for us. All we have to do is reach out and take it. It's there in this. Professor Heaney has reminded us in this most humane of all lectures how vital this is. Professor Heaney, thank you so much for inspiring us.
Lord Bishop, Alumni Illustrissimi, alumni, friends of the Union. On behalf of the Union, it gives me great pleasure to second that vote of thanks to Seamus Heaney. The Union undertook the organisation of this lecture series over a year ago. We planned it, and it is great to see it come into fruition. But none of us could have dreamed it would come to fruition in its inaugural lecture with such a brilliant and dazzling display. We owe a debt of gratitude to Seamus Heaney for coming here today and delivering what was one of the great lectures delivered in this city, in this school, and probably in this country. Thank you very much, Seamus. Just before the lecture, I was talking to Professor Heaney about the classics, and as a bean counter, I said possibly the best definition I would give based upon today's lecture would be a comment ascribed to another Jerry. The classics, they haven't gone away, you know. To Dr. Peter Jones, who has been a great friend to this school and to the classics, we are indeed indebted for his attendance here today. His articles in The Spectator sometimes are much, much better than those of his editor and don't get him into so much bother. Dr. Jones, we look forward to your constant writings and we look forward to future visits to the college. Thank you. It's as the bean counter in me, I come to the subject of money. That'll drive you all to go very quickly. As you know, events and the celebration that we've planned don't just happen. And we've been very, very fortunate by contributors, private, corporate, and by sponsors. In particular, I have today the Bank of Ireland, who have been major sponsors of the year's activities, with particular reference to this lecture series which was initiated. And therefore it gives me great pleasure to call upon Sean Hegarty of the Bank of Ireland to say a few words. Sean.
My Lord Bishops, Father Martin, Reverend Fathers, Mr. President, Dr. Jones, Mr. Mayor, distinguished guests, there's something not quite right about asking a humble sponsor to take the podium after such eloquence. But I have to say that the poor scholar of the 40s jumps to mind. You'll be glad to know that my few words won't be in Latin, although some of you may want to contest that after I'm finished. On behalf of the Bank of Ireland, of course, I would like to offer congratulations to St Colum's and to the College Union for their vision in conceiving the idea of this exciting lecture series to help celebrate the college's 125 years of service to education. These lectures reflect St Colum's ethos of seeking to stimulate constructive debate and new thinking across a broad range of subjects, from the arts to politics, while remaining true to the religious ideals upon which this great college was founded. The contribution we have just heard from one of the best known of St Colum's alumni, the Nobel laureate Seamus Heaney, has, I am sure, made a strong impression on the minds of young and old here this afternoon, and has certainly set the standard for future lectures. I would, of course, ask you on behalf of the Bank of Ireland to join with me in adding our thanks to our guest lecturer. Our sponsorship of this lecture series is part of Bank of Ireland's commitment to the ongoing development of Derry and the North West, not just in economic and social terms, but on the basis of our support for influential institutions such as St Colum's, whose teaching of generations of young people has helped shape life both here, throughout the rest of Ireland, and indeed overseas. As for ourselves, Bank of Ireland was established here in Derry in 1825, some 50 years before the college. We have enjoyed a very long and proud relationship with St Colum's, and like this college, I believe we have been prepared to move with the times, but always to remain faithful to our core values. In closing, may I say that we are therefore both honoured and delighted to be associated with this series, with the college and with the union. Thank you very much indeed.
Just now towards the end, I would like to invite our head prefect, James Gill, to come forward and first of all to make a small presentation to Professor Seamus Heaney and then to Dr. Jones. Okay, James?
Photograph 1957. I'm glad to say that the three of us are still present here. Robert McLaughlin, myself, Pat Deary. I don't know if Seamus McGrotty is here too, but he's the fourth person. Many, many thanks. Beautiful. Thank you.
Just briefly, Nicholas Boyle is the Professor of German Literary and Intellectual History at the University of Cambridge. And in a book called Sacred and Secular Scriptures, he argues that both sacred and secular writings can reveal important truths to us, something that are beyond the scope of reason. And in that book, he has this to say of Professor Heaney: "We have only to pick up a new volume of Seamus Heaney, or for that matter an old volume of Dickens, or even Pope, to have revealed to us a truth at which the reason of the deists could not arrive before the end of the world." For me personally, that judgment of Boyle sums up the significance and importance of Seamus Heaney, the poet. His ability to reveal and to share truths that are common to our individual and collective experience is what has guaranteed his place as one of the greatest poets of our time, recognised most publicly with the Nobel Prize. Professor Heaney Collins has always recognised your achievements, but it seems opportune now to firm that up by inviting you to unveil Mr. Maurice Harlan's sculpture, Professor Seamus Heaney, poet and Nobel laureate, pupil 1951 to 1957. And we all hope to be picking up new volumes of your work for many years to come.
With all the praise, the danger of the swelled head is great. Maurice Harlan is such a good sculptor, so true to his subject, so true to his art. This head will not be swelled. It will be the golden mean, the collective, maybe the head prefect, or airhead. Thank you very much. I suppose it's unveiled by ripping off the veil. Here we go.
So that about wraps it up. Just to thank all of you again for being here. This has been certainly for me, and I know I'm sure for everyone, a wonderful occasion. There's a cup of tea and a light snack in the canteen just down through these doors here. The prefects will guide you along if you're not sure. So thanks again for coming, and safe journey home.
Yes, everything. Brilliant. Everything.